Here's one of the hardest right turns in South Birmingham. I'm giving plenty of space between us and the car in front in case it rolls back. I'm not bothering to look right and left yet. When that black car starts moving, that's where I'll look to the right to begin with. Just seen them take the handbrake off. Now I'll glance right, glance left. Car on the left's giving way. Can't tell where the car on the right's going. It's going ahead. So's the next one. I can judge from its speed. Using clutch control to come up to the junction. And handbrake on. Keeping checking right and left, long gap on the left, so I'll monitor the right a little bit more. Gas, bite, handbrake down just as that final car goes past. I can start moving out into the gap. Checking centre mirror as I move from gear 1 to gear 2.
In 300 yards, turn left onto Warstock Road.
Navigating by SatNav, so 300 yards. It's probably just beyond where that car has
turn left onto Warstock Road.
Come out from the petrol station. And the SatNav has reiterated its instruction. Did my signal after the petrol station, having checked my centre and left mirror. No speed
Continue
signs.
on Warstock Road for half a mile.
So it must be a 30-mile-an-hour road. Apologies that the camera is wobbling around quite a lot, and probably there's a lot of air noise as well, wind noise. So we'll put the window up. Checking my speed, it's just crept up to 33, so we'll let it die back. Put the gas back on. This road was heavily flooded last night, so probably those last half dozen cars we've seen on the left are all destroyed. The water was certainly up into the passenger compartment.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, continue straight onto School Road.
Quarter of a mile. There's about 2,000 yards in a mile, so that's about 500 yards. In other words, nearly twice as far as it was that last junction that we were turning left into. Now I can see the junction, it's a roundabout. I want to go straight ahead, so I'll come into this lane, nothing happening from the right, so we'll go into gear 3, engage that gear before I move on to the roundabout.
In 150 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on School Road.
So if I can see clearly that there's nobody around to signal to, there's no point in taking fingers off the wheel to signal. Here I don't need to signal going on to the roundabout, but I've checked what's behind. There's no lanes marked on the roundabout.
Exit the roundabout onto School Road.
But here I would put a signal on to leave.
Continue on School Road for half a mile.
Major collision with that taxi on the right hand side has been involved in. Maybe that was to do with the water last night. It looks quite fresh, quite a speed as well, because the airbag's gone off inside the taxi. Here we've got a warning of oncoming vehicles in the centre of the road, middle of the road. There's no lines across the road, so neither my direction nor the oncoming direction has priority. So I'll move through cautiously until I can see better. I'll keep going ahead. Some flashing lights ahead warn me that there's something particular to pay attention to. That's telling me what the speed of the vehicle in front of me was. And it reminds me to look up and check about 3 meters above the road surface for any signs. We are now in a 20-mile-an-hour zone. I'm looking for little repeating circular signs on posts as we go down this road. Can't see any on the posts, but it's written on the floor. Car behind's getting moderately close. Not going to let that intimidate me into going faster. And the spacing of the pedestrian crossing points, well, they're not really, they're just pairs of bollards in the middle of the road. There is I wouldn't call it a refuge in the middle, there's a piece of dropped curb, but there's no pole with a dimly glowing constant white globe on.
In 200 yards, turn left onto Priory Road.
So it's not a pedestrian crossing point, but it does separate the road into two halves so that people can get across more easily. I think they're chiefly designed to discourage traffic from speeding down this road.
Take the next left onto Priory Road.
So mirrors, signal, check which gear I'm in, 3, nothing's coming from the right, so we'll keep it in 3 because I can get around that corner, which has a slight downhill slope at 18 miles an hour. No
in 150 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Highfield Road.
Second exit at the roundabout looks like straight ahead. Checked in front, that vehicle's leaving, so I can just carry on straight through, checking my left mirror before I come off the roundabout. Again, keeping it all in gear 3. roundabout. The pub has been painted. An attractive colour that, or maybe they're in process of painting it. Purpley blue. Here we are in Hall Green, or entering Hall Green from Yardley Wood. That's Yardley Wood Station. Obstruction in lane number 1, so there's no point in us trying to move across. We'd only have to move out again up to the speed limit of 30 miles an hour and into gear 4. Car behind still following moderately close, but not desperately close behind me.
In 300 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Highfield Road, A4040.
Still an obstruction in lane 1, so there's no point in going across for that 150 metres or so and then having to come out again. Same with the white car in the distance. I can see the roundabout sign, it's second exit. I can use either lane. I can see obstructions in lane 1 after the roundabout, so I'm actually going to stay over in lane 2 as I enter the roundabout. Then stay on the inside track of the roundabout and then carefully
exit the roundabout onto Highfield Road
and leave the roundabout in lane 2.
In a quarter of a mile, use the right lane to turn left onto Stratford Road, A34.
Quite good instruction from the SatNav. This dual carriageway, which has 2 lanes on each side, that just happens to be a coincidence. It's nothing to do with the definition of a dual carriageway, how many lanes there are on each side. But it's quite good that the SatNav has said stay in the right lane to turn left. That implies that both lanes at the end of the road do turn left, and now I can see there's a couple of circular blue signs pointing to the left. My guess is that there's going to be a right turn very soon after that, and that's why the SatNav has instructed me to stay in the right hand of the 2 lanes, so that I can stay over to the right on the new road and be ready to turn to the right almost as soon as I've got out onto the new road. The sign over above the black car that's coming in from the left confirms that it's a dual carriageway, and to get to Acots Green and Yardley
use the right lane to turn left onto Stratford Road, A34, then turn right onto Fox Hollies Road.
So it's useful that the SatNav is telling me the names of roads. You can sometimes identify those on the sides of buildings or on their own little posts about a metre above the ground, but it is more useful if the SatNav gave you the direction that you're heading for, in this case going towards Acots Green. Make sure the boy's going to stop. He's going through in front of the BMW. He didn't seem to check to his left to make sure there wasn't a bicycle or motorbike coming through between these 2 columns of traffic. But I've got both windows down so I can hear what's happening around and potentially use my horn to warn another road user if somebody else is likely to drive into him. Now I can see there's a slip road for the right turn that's coming up, so we'll go out, right across into the slip road. Probably not worth putting a right signal on here.
Take the next right onto Fox Hollies Road, A4040.
All traffic from this lane has to turn to the right, and a right signal from this position might imply that we're doing a U-turn. There are no signs to say U-turn is prohibited. This turning can in fact hold 2 cars at once. I'll position mine so that we're going to be aiming for the left lane, which is the default lane.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Fox Hollies Road, A4040.
No vehicles behind that were close enough to be worth giving a signal to assist their planning. The BMW that had pulled away from the side of the road in front had got well away by the time I was coming up behind them. Obstruction quite a long distance away in front, so I have come across to lane 1. I've reached the speed limit, I'm in gear 4. I'm monitoring the speed of a grey car behind, and I will use a signal for the benefit of the white car that was coming in from the right, but also the grey car behind, before moving across to lane 2. The SatNav said take the second exit, still signposted Yardley and Acots Green. Once again, I could do it from this lane, because I can see a white van beyond the roundabout, and there are no arrows on the approach lanes. So I'll go on the inner track on the roundabout, and then when I've gone past the previous exit to the one I want, checking, well,
continue on Fox Hollies Road for half a mile.
That's where I want to get my signal on. So actually I want to check my mirrors slightly before, or as I'm going past that that exit before the one that I want. Once again, we're up to the speed limit. No point at all coming back into lane number 1. So hopefully this is useful at explaining a few roundabouts. See if I can get rid of the vibration on the phone. Nothing in lane 1, so I'll move back to lane 1. Car behind's been signalling for a while. It's dropping its speed, looks like it's turning. And now it's left. Saw the BMW in lane 2 behind me. Hasn't come back into lane 1 yet. I'm looking deep into the road ahead. Might be an obstruction with a blue car ahead, or it might be on the side of the road. BMW's up behind very gradually.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Alton Boulevard East, B4514.
Nobody's affected by me changing lanes, so having checked my mirrors, I knew it wasn't worth signalling there. So B4514 is what it says on the sign. That correlates with what I've heard on the SatNav. So we'll put a right signal on because it's going to be third exit. I'll time my arrival so that I can move onto the roundabout. Once again, only a single lane on this roundabout, but fairly wide. So I'm going to stick to the inside of the roundabout, counting off the exits. That was number 2. Here comes number 3. So I've killed my signal, checked my mirrors, put my exit signal on, and off I go. And I think the next roundabout, which is after which I'll end the recording, is the only one that's got multiple lanes on the roundabout. And it looks like...
Keep right to stay on Alton Boulevard East.
At the moment, I don't know why it said keep right there, because the road isn't splitting.
Keep right to stay on Alton Boulevard East.
There's only one lane approaching this roundabout. I can start to see it in the distance now.
In 150 yards, at the roundabout, take the fourth exit and stay on Alton Boulevard East, B4514.
Fourth exit? Well, actually, this has been redesigned recently, and only bicycles can take the first exit. Although it's the fourth exit, it is straight ahead, so I'm going to stay on the outside. We've just been past where cars used to be able to go, but it's only bicycles now. Here's the second exit. The third one is a very small one. So I do my mirrors now, signal to take exit 4. So SatNavs are not always up to date.
Exit the roundabout onto Alton Boulevard East.
And we've already done that.
In 200 yards, at the roundabout, take the third exit and stay on Alton Boulevard East, B4514.
I will leave it recording because the next roundabout is not a conventional shaped one. The priorities are different and the physical geometry of the roundabout is different as well. So we've basically
in a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Gospel Lane, A41.
Quarter of a mile is about 250, no it isn't, it's about 500 yards, 450 yards, because there's 1,760 yards in a mile rather than 2,000 as I said earlier. But you can see that this road sign in front does not imply this is a roundabout. SatNav thinks it is. We're going to be going around to the left because it's no entry going straight ahead, and we can
take the next left onto Gospel Lane, A41, then turn right onto Warwick Road.
Are guiding us round to the left where we have a give way. Nothing's coming from the right, and then it says take right. So again, nobody close enough.
Take the next right onto Warwick Road, A41, then turn left onto Lincoln Road.
Keep it in my lane, check mirrors, come across to the other lane.
Take the next left onto Lincoln Road.
And here we are on Lincoln Road. I can see the street name there, so I know that this is definitely where it wanted me to go.
In 300 yards, turn right onto Lincoln Road North.
But it didn't feel like a roundabout. 100 yards is roughly the distance that you might remember running in a sprint at primary school. Underneath the railway bridge, black and white chevrons in front, implying that there's a significant change of direction of the road.
Take the second right onto Lincoln Road North.
So I'll come down into gear 2. Don't know why it said second right. Maybe it thought that car washing place was the first right, but it had a dropped curb, so it wasn't a road. And here we are approaching the bridge to go over the canal. Gear 2 should be okay at 13-14 miles an hour on this steep slope.
In a quarter of a mile, turn right onto Barn Lane.
quarter of a mile, about 450 yards, 4 or 5 times the distance you might run in a sprint. And at 30 miles an hour, which is roughly the urban speed limit still, until they bring it down to 20, you're going to be covering half a mile every minute. So in a quarter of a mile, that's going to take you, lost track of my arithmetic there, half a minute. Because if you were doing 60 miles an hour, you'd be covering 1 mile every minute.
Take the next right onto Barn Lane.
In an hour. Barn Lane stands out nice and clearly, green background on the street name sign with white lettering. It implies we're in Solihull Council area. Oh,
in a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Wagon Lane.
With black lettering, so maybe it isn't quite as clear as that. I always thought it was. Maybe the city boundary and the city council boundary with Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council is down the middle of this road. Adding gas wherever I see the road starting to rise, getting a little bit of extra gas on just before I hit the bottom of the rise. Here coming down to gear 2, having checked the centre mirror before letting the speed drop a little bit, glancing into the road on the right, and then putting myself minimally over to the right hand side, looking for reflections on those parked cars on the right, and letting the speed come down.
Take the next left onto Wagon Lane.
If I'd not changed out of gear 2 before those parked cars on the left, I would have had a lot of things to do with hands and my left foot while I was trying to navigate.
In a quarter of a mile, turn right onto Wells Green Road.
Past the final end of the obstructions in the road there. We're doing 28 miles an hour. The car in front's probably just braked down to about 30.
Take the next right onto Wells Green Road.
You can now see the street name sign. Quite an old-fashioned car park sign on the left. And here we are on the 1950s style road.
In a quarter of a mile, turn left to stay on Wells Green Road.
Doesn't feel like a quarter of a mile. I know that SatNav's only talking quarters and halves and 300 yards, 200 yards, I think. Some of them say in 30 yards, turn left or turn right, or they might just say now turn left or turn right. I presume the sort of phrases are trademarked to each company, Garmin or TomTom. I would have said that was less than 450 to 500 yards. Fine to stay out in the middle of the road here because I can see clearly there's nothing coming. There could be danger hidden behind that part.
Take the next left to stay on Wells Green Road, then your destination will be on the left.
It is indeed. So I will pull in here well before the corner so that anybody coming round the corner, either from in front who might be cutting the corner or from behind who needs to navigate past me and then deal with what might be coming around the corner, has got time to separate the two hazards, me being the obstruction, the corner also being something that limits the view ahead. Good, so that was chiefly for a bit of roundabout practice, but I hope you found it useful for some other stuff as well.